Florida. 1,000 lights, 10,000 faces, one man center stage. Donald Trump stood before a roaring crowd at a nationally televised political rally. The event was branded as a celebration of American values, themed around what he called the future of the traditional family. Flags waved, cameras flashed, the music cut, and then he spoke. His voice filled the air like a commandment. They've tried to rewrite America, but we're bringing it back. Back to the people who built it. The families who kept it strong. The audience erupted in applause, but not everyone clapped. The camera panned slowly like it had been waiting to do this all along. Front row, third seat from the aisle. Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't scheduled to speak. She hadn't been introduced. She sat still, wearing a deep blue blazer. Her eyes locked on the stage with a stillness that almost looked rehearsed. A few in the crowd started murmuring. A producer whispered something into the host's earpiece. And that's when the host, trying to keep the mood light, smiled and said, "Well, would you look at that? We've got a very special guest from across the aisle with us today." Laughter, light applause. Someone even yelled, "Going to take notes today, Jasmine?" She didn't flinch. Trump looked down, noticed her, and paused just for a second. Then, almost like clockwork, he leaned into the moment. "You know," he said, "we've got Jasmine Crockett with us, the one who loves Twitter more than the Constitution. Don't worry, Jasmine. Tonight you might learn a thing or two about real family values." The crowd laughed louder this time. Some stood up to clap. Others pulled out their phones. Trump grinned and nodded, basking in the approval. But Jasmine didn't move. She didn't blink. She reached down into her bag and pulled out a single printed letter. No expression, no warning, no theatrics. Just one piece of paper, glossy, color-printed, folded once, perfectly aligned. She laid it on her lap, opened it quietly, and looked back at the stage. Trump noticed. He stopped mid-sentence. There was something in the way she looked up, not to argue, not to shout, but as if she already knew something the room didn't. That was the moment the tone shifted. That was the second the volume in the room dropped just a little. And for the first time all night, Donald Trump didn't have full control of the stage. Because Jasmine Crockett hadn't come to clap. She hadn't come to fight. She came to read something. And whatever it was, it had already started changing the air in that room. Trump shifted on stage. For a moment, it looked like he was going back to the teleprompter. But something had changed. He glanced toward the crowd, then back at Jasmine. He pointed straight at her. "Jasmine Crockett," he said, dragging out the name like a headline. "The woman who loves social media more than the law itself." Laughter burst through the room like a reflex. A few people stood and cheered just for the spectacle of it. "She's here tonight to take notes, maybe even learn a thing or two," he said, gesturing wide. "So, Jasmine, tonight, pay close attention. This is how real leadership sounds." The crowd roared. Phones went up. Some zoomed in on her face, waiting for a reaction. But Jasmine didn't give them one. She sat still, not insulted, not offended, not even amused. She simply held the letter in her lap like she was waiting for a break in the noise. Not a permission slip. Trump kept going, but his rhythm started to slip. He chuckled, tried to keep the momentum alive. You see, folks, they show up to these things thinking they can change the narrative. But this isn't Twitter. This is real life. Another laugh, another jab, another round of applause. But the applause didn't land quite the same this time. There was something else in the air now. Attention not built on drama, but on anticipation, because Jasmine still hadn't said a word. And that silence, it started to get louder than the speech. Someone in the front row looked at her, then back at Trump. A man in a press booth adjusted his earpiece. The host from earlier leaned in, whispering frantically to a producer off camera. Trump cleared his throat. "Let's get back on track," he said, waving his hand. But it was too late, because whatever Jasmine had come here to do, she hadn't done it yet. And somehow the crowd could feel it. They weren't sure why she was there. They weren't sure what was on that paper. But they knew this. She wasn't clapping. She wasn't smiling. And she wasn't there to be a spectator. She was waiting. And the room was starting to shift with her. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't move a muscle. She simply lifted the letter. A glossy color-printed page folded with care, not drama. And when the crowd saw it, the applause tapered. The laughs dimmed. Even Trump took a step back. Jasmine didn't ask for a microphone. She didn't wait for permission. She just spoke calmly, clearly like she was reading an answer already written in someone else's handwriting. "I only brought one page," she said. It came from an address labeled Melania Triel. At the crowd went still. "I'm not here to make claims," Jasmine added. "I just want to read it word for word." Trump turned sharply toward stage, right? His eyes scanned the wings, searching for a cue, a producer, a handler, someone who could tell him what this was, but no one moved. Jasmine looked down and began to read. No anger, no emphasis, just words. Words written in silence. Words that weren't supposed to leave the inbox they were born in. She didn't accuse. She didn't explain. She just read. And by the second line, the stage wasn't his anymore. Jasmine held the paper in both hands. The lights didn't dim. The crowd didn't move. Even the cameras seemed unsure whether to zoom in or pull away. Then, in a voice that never rose, never cracked, she read. "I never believed the speeches he wrote. They were always for the crowd, not for the people closest to him. I know what it feels like to stand beside someone who only loves power, not the person standing next to them." You could feel it, the chill moving across the room. Jasmine didn't pause. She kept going like the words were flowing through her, not from her. "There was a time I believed our son would be protected from all of this. That he would grow up without the weight of these headlines, the performances, the legacy built on stage lights. But I was wrong." Jasmine looked up for just a second. Not at Trump, not at the crowd, but at the silence. Not a single phone rang. Not a single cheer broke through. Even Trump had stopped shifting. And still she read. This was never supposed to be his world. But the cameras don't go away. The microphones always find their way home. Her tone didn't change. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just reading. Reading a letter that sounded less like a headline and more like someone trying not to disappear. And in that moment, no one was asking if it was real. They were asking what could make someone close to power feel so far from it. And why this woman Jasmine came all this way. Just to let the room hear it. By now you could hear everything. Cough in the third row. Chair creaking near the back. The whisper of someone's jacket as they reached for their phone. The room was packed shoulder to shoulder, but it felt like no one was breathing. And then Trump spoke. His voice cut through the silence like a hammer trying to fix a mirror already cracked. "That's enough," he said, pointing again. "That letter's fake. You're making it up." He took a step forward. "This is another stunt, another act. You're standing on my stage trying to." But Jasmine didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She just lifted one more sheet of paper. Not emotional, not performative, just calm. And she said the email was sent from a registered IP address in West Palm Beach. She turned the page. The recovery email was tied to a family domain. The backup question was a pet's name. The answer, a name only known inside that house. No dramatics, no accusations. Just technical facts quietly placed like bricks on a table. Trump froze for a split second. He glanced stage left again, but no one moved. No one interrupted. Even his staff didn't know what to do. The audience wasn't clapping anymore. They weren't laughing. They were recording. One by one, cameras started going up. Not out of outrage, but out of instinct. Something important was happening and they didn't want to miss it because in that moment the noise died and truth, even whispered, was starting to speak louder than power shouted. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't demand anything. She just let the silence carry what she'd said. And slowly the crowd began to shift. Not toward her, not against him, but toward something deeper. The feeling that someone had finally said what wasn't supposed to be said and proved it. Jasmine lowered the final page. The stage was still. The lights hadn't dimmed, but the room felt darker. Trump stood frozen. The energy he brought minutes earlier had vanished, replaced by a silence too thick to fill. And that's when Jasmine finally looked up. Not at the cameras, not at the crowd, at him. Her voice steady, her tone deliberate. "I didn't come here to talk about your marriage. Came to ask one question. Why does the woman closest to you feel like she has to disappear to be heard?" The room didn't react. Not yet. Because the question didn't land like a punch. It landed like a mirror. Trump didn't answer. He didn't joke. He didn't deflect. He stared, knuckles tightening around the microphone. The way a man holds on to a story that's slipping out of his hands. The crowd stayed silent, not out of fear, not out of confusion, but because in that moment, something sacred had been asked, and no one was ready to speak over it. Jasmine didn't follow up. She didn't add more. She just let the question sit there like a truth too real to dress in more words. And for the first time all night, he had no response. Jasmine Crockett didn't wait for applause. She didn't look back. She simply folded the letter, placed it back in her bag, and stood. The silence didn't break, deepened. As she walked off stage, a few people clapped slowly, uncertainly. Not the kind of applause that follows a performance. The kind that follows a realization because something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in the people watching at home, on live streams, behind screens they thought would shield them from feeling anything tonight. And then on every screen in the arena, words appeared. She didn't yell, she didn't accuse, she just read. No music, no outro, no breaking news alert, just that. Because this was never about volume or politics or headlines. This was about a question. A question that cut deeper than any speech ever could. Why would the person closest to power feel like they had to vanish to be heard? It wasn't an attack. It wasn't even a challenge. It was a mirror held up in front of a stage that rarely sees its own reflection. And what made it powerful wasn't that Jasmine had evidence or poise or control. It was that she didn't come to expose a scandal. She came to remind the country that silence can be truth too. In a world trained to reward the loudest voices, she showed what it means to let a question speak louder than any microphone ever could. She didn't ask for justice. She didn't demand answers. She gave us something harder to ignore, a feeling, a weight, a pause. Because sometimes leadership isn't about owning the room. It's about standing in it and choosing to speak only when you know the words aren't yours, but the truths. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do on a stage built for noise is to let silence do the talking. Jasmine Crockett didn't win the crowd. She didn't win the night. She won something else. A moment that told the world we don't need more speeches. We need more people who aren't afraid to ask why was the truth buried, and who made her feel like she had to whisper it. And that's what stayed long after the camera stopped rolling. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.